Hello.
Hello.
It's 7 o'clock.
Earlier today, we started a new journey with Swami Rama. The journey is through a call to humanity. A call to humanity. Humorously said, humanity, humanity. Somebody said that one of the times we were going through this together. Hello, Scott. Hi, John. And I wanted to read you this little thing. It's a quote off of the back cover of this. It's kind of relevant to the way in which we are communicating. I think you'll like it. In the world of today, one can be at peace with oneself only if one's neighbor is also at peace. The continents have become closer to each other. So often when we get together, we are all over the world. With the modern means of communication, the vast world of ours has contracted. We must learn to coexist and cultivate peace, harmony, love, and universal brotherhood. The whole world has to live like one family. The welfare of the entire world is every human being's concern. Not an easy task to do by any means, is it? But we're doing our small part by coming together like this. Hello again, Mary. Hi, Nilesh. And so anyway, we are just starting with chapter 1. I think this text has 7 chapters on it. And we've just started, and the name of this one is The Existence of God. It doesn't start small. As long as a human being is confined to his ego, he fails to comprehend the higher existence of the truth, big T truth. With the purification of the samskaras, an aspirant transcends his egoism and realizes the limited value of worldly objects. The moment a person loses his interest in this mirage-like world, divine awareness dawns in his heart. As long as he remains a victim of his insatiable desires, he can neither have faith in the absolute reality, big A, big R, absolute reality, nor can he aspire to experience it. An aspirant must control the dissipation of his mind. Conquest over senses and mind helps him attain freedom from the charms and temptations of the world. Free from worldly distractions, there is nothing in his mind but the longing to know God. Once such an exclusive longing is born, he is absorbed in contemplating and meditating on God, or truth or reality. Through his constant contemplation and meditation, constant, not easy, but that's what we're trying to do, constant meditation and contemplation. Through that, he begins having glimpses. I love that word, glimpses. Doesn't mean that you have to become Christ or Krishna or Buddha, but glimpses. Begins having glimpses of the truth that strengthen his faith, because then it's experiential. Growing internally, that exclusive faith becomes the source of inner strength, enabling the aspirant to move along the path until perfection is achieved. Incidentally, as a side note here, he used this word inner here. What we're talking about here is called Antar Yoga, the inner yoga. If you know the 8 rungs of yoga, the first 5 of the 8 rungs are external yoga. The last 3 deal with the mind and are called Antar Yoga or inner yoga. That's what we put a lot of effort into. The desire to find and know the truth, the first 5 are preparation. The desire to find and know the truth is a great virtue in itself. As a result of the virtuous deeds of the past, people are inspired to search for the truth, big T truth. How genuinely and forcefully they search depends on how much they have purified and sharpened their intellect. Listen to that again. How genuinely and forcefully they search depends on how much they have purified and sharpened their intellect, because that intellect is an instrument. It's not that this is about intellectualizing in an academic study sort of sense. That's not it. The more purified and sharpened the intellect is, the more they are able to contemplate on the truth. As they think, contemplate, and meditate, the truth is unfolded. Direct experience is received, and consequently, faith is strengthened. Through the gradual unfoldment of the truth, the aspirant's confusion is removed. So how is confusion removed? Through the gradual unfoldment of truth. It's not some big, burning bush flash that finally it's all over. It's a gradual revealing or unfoldment of truth. The aspirant's confusion is removed. And he no longer mistakes blind faiths for real faith. The spiritual journey becomes accelerated when he realizes the transitory nature of the worldly objects. And I'm going to read that again. Take this principle, let it sink in. The spiritual journey becomes accelerated when he realizes the transitory nature of worldly objects. We come to see that all of our stuff out here in the world, whether we think it is mine or not, it's all transitory. Everything that we think we own is here temporarily. And the more we see that this is what's going on, it causes an acceleration in the spiritual journey. It may seem a shock as we realize this. It can feel a little bit saddening, if not depressing, but it's also inspiring. He notices how limited the worldly objects and their experiences are, and instantly loses his interest in sense enjoyment. Paradoxically, it doesn't mean sense enjoyment is totally gone, but there's an incredible increase in the perspective of the nature of sense enjoyment. His energy naturally turns inward, and he becomes determined to unveil the secret of his inner life, once again called Antar Yoga, the inner yoga. He resolves to transcend his worldliness and find the unlimited, infinite reality, big R reality. As long as an aspirant has not realized the smallness of the worldly objects and the greatness of the divine force, his belief in God is weak and almost fruitless. Not completely fruitless, but almost fruitless. Before this twofold realization, a human being thinks that he believes in God, but in fact his belief is mere pretense. That is why in his day-to-day life, when he is influenced by successes and failures, he begs the world for any possible help. Fear and weakness indicate that he believes more in the world than in God. We don't believe that, but we see that it's true. We're so involved in the world that our belief in worldly stuff is greater than that of God. A person with faith in God cannot compromise his peace of mind with worldly loss and gain. For him, every circumstance and event in life contains only the good, never the bad, because his life is guided by God. And here we're talking God as the infinite one, non-dual, absolute reality, which we talked about earlier. A believer knows that God's grace flows equally to all. In the kingdom of God, there is no discrimination or sense of inequity. Since God is an embodiment of love, compassion, and auspiciousness, God never wants just a few people to be happy and the rest unhappy. Note here the sort of what I call the poetic use of the word God, and sometimes referred to as Him. What we've talked before in this section here, as we went through earlier, about truth, big T truth, and big R reality, and the absolute reality. And these words here are being used kind of interchangeably with the word God, not with the word God as being a Him who is up there in the heavens somewhere looking down upon all of us. It's two different uses of this word God. There need not be any conflict there, but it's very useful to remember that there's two general ways in which this word God is used. And so then here is a poetic use of the word God as a hymn, although that's not what we're talking about, because note here the choice of words. It says God never wants just a few people to be happy and the rest unhappy. That almost sounds like a hymn who is there looking down on the masses, and that's not what it's talking about. Being identical to the truth, listen to that. Being identical to the truth, His glory sheds, and note here this poetic use of the word His. Why His? Because this is common language in our culture. And so He's just speaking here to the culture in which we live in our modern world. And this is a very common poetic use to personify the infinity. So the infinity gets personified and referred to as Him. And if we understand that, then we can see that it's used in two different ways, while we know that we're talking about the absolute one, non-dual reality, big O-N-E, one. The sun, the moon, the stars shine for all. Nature dispenses her beauty and gifts for all. In the same manner, God dispenses His grace in the form of love. Once again, that use of the word His. He dispenses His grace in the form of love, knowledge, and compassion equally to all beings. Another metaphor is the sun. Just like the sun radiates its light to everybody on earth. Obviously, except when there's a storm going around. It's a little test there. Out of ignorance, a feeling of I amness is born. That word ignorance here does not mean low IQ. It's the word avidya, meaning forgetting the truth. Called ignorance. But again, that doesn't mean stupid. It doesn't mean we're stupid people. It's just we don't see clearly. Out of ignorance, a feeling of I amness is born. Forcing consciousness to feel individualized, limited, distinct, and different from the absolute truth. Because of ego, one excludes oneself from the universal self, big S self, and as a result, considers oneself separate from the omniscient, almighty God or truth. Ignorance is the main cause of all miseries, and remember, that's avidya. And ignorance, once again, does not mean low IQ, doesn't mean we're stupid people in that sense of ignorance. Oops, lost my page there. Lost my page again there. Ignorance is the main cause of all miseries in life. Out of ignorance, one becomes attached to certain objects of the world and forgets that all objects belong to God. Now, again, there's poetic choice of words. It sounds like there's a hymn and He owns all the real estate. That's not what's being said there. It's that there is one reality and none of it is mine. And so as a sort of storytelling, like a myth in a storytelling sense, we realize none of this stuff out here is mine. It belongs to infinity. Or in poetic choice of words, we say it belongs to Him as God. But it doesn't mean that there's a being out there who holds the deed to your house. Out of ignorance, one begins differentiating between objects in terms of good or bad, big or small, and inferior or superior. Once that process begins and the net of attachment and aversion is created, one finds oneself completely entangled. And that good or bad and big or small, inferior or superior is called the pairs of opposites. So we get lost in the duality out here, and we forget the unity, the oneness of which I am a part. At the beginning of creation, now here's an ancient story. This is just a myth. It's just a story. So we're not saying this as a religious statement for us to believe. It's not promoting a particular religious. It's just a story. At the beginning of creation, Prajapati, the Lord of life, alone existed. Out of his sheer will, he manifested into many. This Upanishadic assertion is a spiritual guideline. It's only a guideline for seeing the existence of the universal truth through all diversities found in the world. Note that phrase, universal truth through all the diversities found in the world. So as a sideline comment, any worldview that says that there is one, that there's only one reality, must have some story, some language, some myth, some description, some way of accounting for the fact that there appears to be duality. There appears to be me. I'm sitting here. There appears to be a Scott. Hi, Atma. There appears to be an Atman. There appears to be a Roho over there on the couch. There appears to be a Nilesh. There appears to be a Mary, etc. There appears to be a John. For me, there appears to be all of you. And for you, there appears to be all these other people. And so we must have some perspective or worldview or way of looking at this so we can see that there is actually one reality, but it manifests outward with the appearance of many. And there's a beauty in that. This Upanishadic assertion about Prajapati is a spiritual guideline for seeing the existence of one universal truth through all diversities found in the world. Some will describe that the story of Adam and Eve that is in Genesis, the first book of the Western Bible. Some will explain that the story of Adam and Eve is not literally of the first human and the first human woman and the first human man, but that it's a symbolic story about how unity appears to come as diversity. There are many, many, many such stories. And as yogis, we can see, wait a minute, there's something to all of them. And they're all kind of fun in their own way because they're telling this one existence of a one universal truth through all the diversities. Therefore, a necessary step toward God realization is to replace the world with God. Without changing one's worldview, one cannot transform one's attitude, and without the transformation of attitude, one cannot determine how to think properly. So we get stuck in our thinking that continually sees only duality, and then the intelligence rests in the ignorance that does not allow us to see the unity. The history of spirituality reminds us that many great saints and devotees of God previously had been non-believers. Out of a lack of knowledge, it is natural to remain indifferent towards the truth. Eventually, that indifference may grow into non-belief. In the case of a fortunate one, however, indifference is removed, and curiosity to know the truth is born. Then, as he searches, he finds. Once he finds, he can neither remain indifferent nor can he disbelieve any longer. Now, here's a particular perspective on the Western view. In the Christian tradition, St. Paul railed against Christianity, but later became a great devotee of God and is now considered one of the great saints of the West. In Indian history, the life of Suradasa is an example of that kind of transformation. Lacking in foresight, human beings consider their present conditions and circumstances alone to be the truth. My present circumstance is truth. Taking their present condition for granted, they refuse to explore the possibility of other states of existence. The conscious part of the mind fails to grasp that which lies beyond the spheres of time, space, and causation. Hi, Rosalind. And what we're looking for, the oneness, is beyond time and space and causation. So we, in our ignorance, have fallen asleep into this plane of reality, this world, where there very clearly is the sequencing of time. So tonight we have to remember to set our clocks to spring forward. So time is changing tonight. And space, we live in space. There's a here, and there's a here, and there's a there, and there's an up and down. So we live in the domain of space, and we live in the domain of time, and we live in the domain of causation, where things occur in sequence, this, and this, and this, and this. And that happens only as we have manifested out here, because the oneness, the truth, the reality, whatever you want to call that, is not within the domain of time, space, and causation, except in the sense that it's infinite, so it's everywhere at all time. But you and I dwell in this domain of time, space, and causation. And the conscious part of mind fails to grasp. And that's where you and I are living most of the time, is in our conscious mind. So the conscious part of the mind fails to grasp that which lies beyond the spheres of time, space, and causation. There's nothing wrong with having a mind. These minds that you and I have are tremendously, tremendously useful. It's what allows us to live out here in this world and play this game. That's a good thing. And we can solve problems out here in the world. But that's what the mind is for. But the mind itself cannot go beyond time, space, and causation, which is where it came from. But another more illumined part of human beings is aware, at least subliminally, that reality, big R, reality, is more than what is known and seen. Afraid to explore the unknown and unseen, most people emphasize only the existence of the manifest aspect of the truth. That's most people. According to the scriptures, the unmanifest and therefore the unseen and unknown aspect of reality is higher than the manifest world. Activities in the external world are inspired and governed by the higher force of the inner world. That which takes place in the physical world is a mere reflection of that which has already taken place in the inner world. This is why we're trying to do antar yoga or inner yoga. And that word is not a brand name like is popular these days. The scriptures also state that the physical world is determined by the force of the inner world. The nature of inner life changes the quality of external life. The way we think is the way in which we form our personality. We form our personality out here from that inner world. That inner world is also governed by the more subtle force of the divine. It exists on the foundation of the higher divine force. From that unmanifest divine force, which goes by different names, which I think we're going to come to shortly in a couple pages, the inner mental world evolves, and from there comes the external physical world. Spirituality means allowing that inner world to remain illumined by the light of the divine force. A fully illumined inner world, which at an individual level is known as chitta, the mind field, sends forth the thought forces to the external world. A ripple of thought arising from an illumined mind field affects the external world. The thoughts, speech, and actions of an illumined person are in perfect harmony. He knows that he is a citizen of two worlds simultaneously, the world out here and the world in there. The purification and illumination of the inner world is of utmost importance. Hi, Allison. Mind, polluted by doubt, mistrust, and confusion, stands between divine awareness and physical existence. So the mind stands between those two worlds. But mind is the finest of all the instruments a human being has for exploring the truth within. Nothing wrong with having a mind. It's a wonderful, wonderful instrument. It cannot go the whole journey back to the truth. It has to be dropped somewhere along the way, but it's an incredible instrument along the way. Without proper thinking and discrimination, a human being fails to see his essential oneness with the truth, and therefore identifies himself with the external garment, the body. Oops. False identification with the body makes him a victim of pain and pleasure. His insatiable desire for pleasure and aversion to pain force him to keep transmigrating from one life state to another. I'll add here too, there's nothing wrong with having a body. It's nice to have a body. It allows us to be out here in a body using this mind in the world out here. But the body is part of what is called Bahir Yoga. Antar Yoga is the inner yoga. This is what we're talking about here. This is not to negate the external yoga. All the work with external yoga dealing with the physical body and the breath and the senses is very useful, very, very important. But that is called external yoga. What we're talking about here is the inner or internal yoga, the Antar Yoga. So they are not in conflict. They dance together. Believing in God also means believing in one's own godly nature. Without realizing his identity with God or divine existence, a human being cannot attain peace and happiness. The belief that leads a human being towards immortality is the belief in God. And note here again, remember what we were talking about earlier, the way in which this word God is used. It's the belief, it's an intuition that there is one absolute non-dual reality. That's one of the usages of the word God. It does not just mean that God is a person, a him who is somewhere else and did such things as are described in religious belief. So there's different usages of the word. Believing in God also means believing in one's own godly nature. Without realizing his identity with God or divine existence, a human being cannot attain peace and happiness. The belief that leads a human being towards immortality is the belief in God. It just makes sense that there is some one infinite source from which we come. That which leads him towards mortality is belief in untruth. That which leads him towards mortality is belief in untruth. It's so easy to accidentally believe that all of this out here is reality. And that is believing in the untruth. It looks so real out here, but that's where we goof up. After the purification of intellect, faith in God is born. But again, this is something not faith in a him up there, but a certainty, a sense of certainty, of knowing that there is an infinity, there is a truth, there is a reality, there is a ground of all being. However, as faith is confined to the domain of intellect, there is still questioning and doubt. Of course, there's questioning and doubt. It's the nature of mind, I'm adding. A purified intellect is the most efficient tool for contemplation of the truth. So once again, the intellect is a very useful tool. But truth cannot be comprehended through the intellect alone. Truth cannot be comprehended through intellect alone. We cannot merely think our way into this. A sharp intellect can generate a hypothesis, and with the help of logic and reasoning can prove it as true. But, listen to this, but that intellectual hypothesis proven to be true may not necessarily be the truth. In fact, there is no end to such hypotheses because there is no end to logic and reasoning. For example, the Nyaya system of Indian philosophy proves the existence of God through profound logic and reasoning. In its profundity of logic, no other system of truth can stand against Nyaya. But there are philosophers who can tear apart the system of logic and reasoning as expounded by Nyaya and can refute the existence of God through another system of logic and reasoning. The suggestion here being made that you can just drive yourself absolutely crazy and sitting around having debates with friends. Usually an effect presupposes a cause, and almost every system of philosophy believes inference to be a valid source of knowledge. There are philosophers, however, who are able to prove the fallacy of inferring the existence of cause from a perceivable effect. Even the validity of knowledge based on direct experience can be contradicted by intellectual reasoning. You just drive yourself crazy. A trained intellect can prove or disprove anything. However, whether the intellect validates or invalidates it, it never affects the truth, the underlying reality. Truth is self-evident and self-existent. Logic and reasoning, if properly directed, can help the intellect turn inward to contemplate within. But the same reasoning process can also mislead the intellect, forcing it to believe in its own hypotheses instead of the truth. God is certainly not a subject of intellectual questioning and reasoning, which is not to say that we should not use intellect and reasoning. Otherwise, the whole world could have realized God. Intellect is of little value in experiencing the truth directly, although it is a great instrument in discriminating the truth from the untruth. Unfortunately, human beings do not have a better means than the intellect for contemplating within. I'm going to pause here and give you a simple little example of truth and untruth so that this that we're talking about here doesn't drive you absolutely just crazy. Here is a pen. It's just a ballpoint pen. I was looking for a pencil. Pencil works better, but I don't know where my pencil went. This is a pen. Now I'm going to explain to you the way in which this is also an unreality. It is a real pen. I can take it, and unless it's run out of ink, I can write with it. But this thing I'm holding in my hand is a composite. It's made of plastic that was probably started out as oil in an oil well and was pumped up and turned into plastic. And they dug up some metal and made a little metal ball here. And so the pen was constructed out of other stuff. So in some sense, the pen is an unreality. It does not have its own independent existence. It's a composite of other stuff formed together. So that is an example, the spirit by which something is both real and unreal. And we are surrounded by stuff in the world like this. I just wanted to pause and give you an example a simple example from just what's here. This is a card that has an image on it. What's it made of? It's made of paper. What's paper made of? Paper is made of trees that have been grown and then chopped up and turned into paper. So the postcard, the card here, in a sense, is real, but yet at the same time it's unreal, because what's more real is the tree that it came from. Anyway, Brahman. Now here's an important word if you're not familiar with this. Brahman is the Lord of the universe. If we misunderstand this word Brahman, it sounds like it sounds like what's being said here is the name of the man in the sky. God is Brahman, and that's not what the word Brahman means. It's simply not a name like a name of a person. It's simply the word that means what is a label, what is a terminology that refers to that one infinite, completely, totally non-dual reality of infinity. One of the words for that infinity is Brahma. And where it says the word Lord here does not mean overseer as God in the sky. It means like source. If I take the ice cubes out of the freezer, the Lord of the ice cubes is called water. The source of ice cubes, when you put the ice cubes in your glass of water to make some cold tea, or like that, the Lord of ice cubes is water. That's the spirit, the source. Brahman is the Lord of the universe. Now it makes more sense for me to listen to this next sentence. Pure existence, consciousness, and bliss are the intrinsic nature of Brahman. The power of creation, maintenance, and annihilation. Now here again, Swami Rama is about to use poetic terminology. And let's remember that it's a choice of words that's poetically acceptable in the culture. It's a cultural terminology. The power of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, the power to execute his own self-defined law, grace, and the power to uplift his own law are the inherent capacities of Brahman. And if we don't have some explanation or understanding of that, we would read this and say, oh, this is a religion and the name of their man in the sky is Brahman, not Allah or not the Father, etc. But that's not the meaning of the word. It's just a poetic choice of words that is used in our culture. So this is just in a cultural context. His own self-defined law, grace, and power to uplift his own nature are the inherent capacities of Brahman. Despite these powers and characteristics, Brahman is never characterized, since they all are intrinsic to him. Again, there's that word. Like heat to fire and light to the sun. Heat is inherent in fire. Light is inherent in the sun. There is no difference between fire and its heat, or the sun and the sun's rays. There is no difference between Brahman and his inherent powers. Again, poetic choice of words. They are one and the same. From the standpoint of unmanifest reality, here we go. Now listen, this will make sense again. From the standpoint of unmanifest reality, Brahman alone exists. And from the standpoint of manifest reality, the power of Brahman is evident. Nothing would be here if it did not have, no effect would be here if there was not an infinite cause. Although inseparable from Brahman, Shakti, the power of Brahman, is the cause of creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the universe. So there's consciousness manifesting outward. You and I already know this. Look what happens every night when we go to bed. We go to sleep, whatever sleep is. And then tomorrow morning, what do? We stir and we move and we get out of bed and we start our day over. Something is manifesting outward, and all of us already know this. The universe originates from Shakti, resides in Shakti, and ultimately is reabsorbed into Shakti. The one single non-dual Shakti transforms herself into the vast universe. And again, this is symbolic language. It's not saying now that, okay, now all of a sudden God is a woman in heaven or something like that. These are poetic uses of words. And I'll add here that the way Swami Rama is describing in this text, this particular book we're going through, he doesn't hold back. This is a book that is filled with passion. So he coming right out of the gate, he hits us with some stuff that can be very difficult to comprehend. And so, but it's rich. If you can tolerate listening to the richness of this, I know you're enjoying it. Light bulb moment, pen, paper, example, truth, untruth. Got it. Good, Ellison. Thank you. That's why I tell you, that's why much of these principles are taught, are discussed in terms of little stories like that, because a little story like that is supposed to cause that click to occur. And then you say, as you did, got it. That's what it's all about. And once you got it, it's no longer somebody else's philosophy. It's not me talking about a pen. It's not Swami Rama writing a book. It's not the ancient sages. It's not Patanjali writing the Yoga Sutras. It's Allison that goes, wow, this is obvious. That's your aha. That's your got it. That's why we do this stuff. There is no Brahman apart from Shakti, and there is no Shakti apart from Brahman. Listen to this obvious metaphor. We all know this. Just as waves arise and subside in the water, the world of multiplicity appears, exists for a moment, and dissolves back into Shakti. As most of you know, I'm in Florida. Ashram is here in Florida. We're right near an ocean. And I will often ask people, particularly if they're visiting or we're local and we don't make it out to the beach very often, I say, please go to the beach, go sit on the beach and watch this magic for yourself. Notice that you can see a wave arise out of the Gulf of Mexico and it comes crashing up onto the beach and then it goes away. And then another wave comes and goes and they come and go. And you can kind of blink your eyes and in one moment you see there's a wave, there's a wave, there's a wave. There's waves all over the place. And you can kind of blink your head and shake your eyes and open your eyes again. And you say, now what I see is ocean. You blink again and you see a whole bunch of waves. And gradually what you're seeing is my mind has the capacity to see either individual waves or to see just there is the ocean. And both are true. Both are true. There are waves and there is only ocean. Just as waves arise and subside in the water, the world of multiplicity appears, exists for a moment, and then dissolves in the Shakti. As water resides in the ocean, Shakti resides in Brahman. The absolute truth, endowed with all powers and knowledge, is God. I'm going to read that again because we've been hearing where he was using the poetic use of the word God as him and then use Shakti as her. And it can say, wait a minute, what are we really talking about? The absolute truth, the infinite one, endowed with all powers and knowledge is God. You see, it's a word that's being used for that infinite truth. It's called Brahman, or alternatively, you can use the word God. Remember, the chapter we're looking at here is entitled The Existence of God. So he's journeying all over the place for us to take us on a journey together so we can get an understanding, a subtler understanding of the breadth of meaning with which this word God is used. For an ignorant person, this universe is seen as, listen to this carefully, you're going to like this. For an ignorant person, this universe is seen as different from God and therefore is considered to be illusory and unreal. For a wise man or woman, however, this world is not different from God, since there exists nothing but God. For him, all the powers and forces, even the material objects of the world emanate from God, dwell in God, and function through God. So God, there's not that there's a him and he's going to take sides with me in the sports game or the war that we're having with the neighboring country. For him, all the powers and forces, even the material objects of the world emanate from God, dwell in God, and function through God. Even the great divine forces known as Kala or time and Vidya or knowledge, which control and maintain the entire universe, emanate from and function under the guidance of God. I think I'm going to pause here and pick it up next time. And here's a little sentence that this is the cliffhanger for the next time. You're going to like this. It makes sense with what we were just doing. We could keep going, but this makes a nice entry into another section. The manifest world is pervaded by the subtle divine force. Like space, that force is abstract, expansive, and all-pervading. The subtle divine force. So, to be continued, okay? I hope you're enjoying this. It's pretty good stuff, isn't it? This book, as I said when we started the first session earlier today, this book is just loaded with his passion coming through, because he's not holding back at all. He's not giving us gentle introductions and just quietly leading us down a road of philosophy or something. He just comes right out of the gate and bang, hits us with this intense passion. So, to be continued. Thank you for visiting and playing. And why don't I hear that goddess from the subtle realm telling me to push the button. I actually have to push 2 buttons. It's great stuff. Yes, it is, isn't it? I'm going to push button number 1, and then, whoops, I pushed it and nothing happened. There. Now I have to push button number 2. And let's pretend that when I push button number 2 here, that it will take us to a glimpse of this one infinite non-dual reality that is the Shakti receding inward, or is Brahman, or is that divine force, or is God as the infinite one. And this is all to be found where? In the silence that is at the end of an Om.